All right, we'll get this show rolling. I want to welcome everybody to the April 16th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. Can we have roll call, please?
Chair Beck.
Here.
Commissioner Lavra. Here. Commissioner Holland.
Here.
Commissioner Tisdall.
Here.
Commissioner Zielinski.
Here.
Commissioner Yanasak.
Here.
Commissioner Finch.
Here.
Okay, well, it looks like we have two sets of minutes to approve. So let's start off with the March 26, 2019 Riverfront public hearing. Anybody have any comments on those meetings?
I just had one clarification that I think was just an oversight probably. On page 5, on the last sentence of the last paragraph, it is important in the process to recognize that we are approving a concept or master plan or a specific parking location. I think you meant not a specific parking location at this time. Okay, with that correction, I'm
That's
okay
an
with it.
important correction. Good correction. Any other comments? Would anybody like to move to adopt these minutes?
Move to approve or adopt.
Second? No, you got there first.
Commissioner Finch.
Yes.
Commissioner Yanasak.
Yes.
Commissioner Zielinski.
Abstain.
Commissioner Tisdall.
Yes.
Commissioner Holland.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavra.
Yes.
Chair Beck.
Abstain. All right, so now we'll move on to the meeting minutes for April 2nd, the sign regulation public hearings. Anybody have comments on those minutes? Pretty short meeting.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Commissioner Finch.
Abstain.
Commissioner Yanasak.
Abstain.
Commissioner Zielinski.
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdall.
Yes.
Commissioner Holland.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavra.
Yes.
Chair Beck.
Yes. Okay. Let's move on to reports from members. Let's start with Commissioner Finch.
None. None. No report? No report.
Nothing for me this evening.
No report.
All right, no reports from me either. All right, do we have any staff comments at this time?
Just one, Alan Giffen, Planning Director. A couple of weeks ago, the City Council passed a resolution and asking the Planning Commission to prepare a climate action plan. And at this point, I don't have much detail on that for you. We had been talking with the City Council Government Subcommittee, Government Affairs Subcommittee about climate action plan, and they wanted to bring forward a resolution to indicate that it's a very important subject to them, and they did have some specifics in the resolution. I'll make sure that we can pass a copy of that resolution on to you. I don't have any thing to bring forward in terms of a work program yet. We don't have a budget for that. A little bit more discussion with administration will be required before we know what the budget and scope of the work will be. I suspect we may end up hiring a consultant to help with that work, but at this point, don't have a date by which I would bring that forward. We'll probably have some discussion in the next 2 weeks with administration to try to determine more what that work program will look like and follow up with the commission after that.
Will this be the first climate action plan that the city has adopted?
As a formal climate action plan, the city has taken a lot of steps for over the last dozen years or so to address climate issues in a number of areas, and in the 2015 comprehensive plan is included for the first time a climate change and sustainability element that has somewhere in the neighborhood of about 68 policies and actions, and so we do have a pretty strong body of policies within the comprehensive plan. The next steps within the climate action plan would probably go towards some things like emissions reduction targets, so greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets, and So a bit more technical work is required there. We also in 2016 had the carbon wedge analysis report that was prepared and presented to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. So there's been quite a bit of work done in the past, but as a formal climate action plan, no, there has not been one as such adopted previously.
Does any other commissioners have questions on this? Okay. So at this time, is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on something that is not on the agenda? No? So if it's okay with my fellow commissioners here, I'm going to move item number 4 because we did have only one person sign up for public testimony tonight. And so are you handling Waterfront, Alan?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to item number 4.
Thank you. We have a brief PowerPoint presentation, and there are some elements of this action item tonight that are similar to conversations that we've had recently about the riverfront, and a lot more about this major modification that doesn't have really the complexity of the stuff we've been talking about with the riverfront recently. But Port of Everett is requesting a major modification to the Waterfront Place Plan Development Overlay Master Plan. It is a request to change the alignment of Weaver Street, which is one of the streets within the overall master plan. And within the Plan Development Overlay Zone, a major modification includes a number of things, one of which is rearrangements of lots and blocks. And so we looked at this with the Port of Everett and thought, gee, this is just too simple to be a major modification, but based on this language, there's no way that we were able to find that it qualified as a minor modification, and so therefore it's been submitted for an amendment to the Planning Commission, and the first step in the process, which obviously will go to the City Council after the Planning Commission is done. So in the overall context of the master plan for Waterfront Place, which you can see on this diagram, is about a 65-acre upland area between two marinas on the north and the south. This is a master plan that was last updated in 2015. It was a major overhaul to a plan that had been adopted in 2005, but that plan needed to be reworked after the recession. There were a lot of things about that 2005 plan that just caused the Port of Everett to go back to the drawing board and reevaluate, and the plan that you see up here was adopted in 2015. I will see if this cursor will work here. Oops. As a pointer, here we go. You can see the red box here is the area that we're going to be focusing on, but just to kind of orient you, this is West Marine View Drive out on the east edge of the project boundaries. This is 13th Street, the main entrance into the development. This building over here is the building that houses the Port of Everett administrative offices and Scuttlebutt and the ORCA program and a number of other businesses. It's been there for quite a while, even before the 2005 2015 plan amendments, and a portion of that building go back even before the 2005 master plan. So the overall master plan calls for some phased development. The first phase of development that is occurring right now is in the Fisherman's Harbor area. In this vicinity, there's a proposal for some housing in this vicinity. The hotel that's under construction is over here in relationship to the rest of the project. The old yacht club building is out at the west end. The Warehouser building was relocated to this area out here. This is where they have a farmer's market during the summertime, just for orientation. So the next slide is a close-up of the area that we were talking about, and the orange, brownish orange line that you see here is the current alignment of Weaver Street, and the proposal is to straighten that out so that it extends straight south to intersect the cross street in this location. And so the current configuration in the plan, anyway, it hasn't been built, but the current configuration in the plan would have the north leg of Weaver Street with no on-street parking, and the south leg with angled parking on the southwest side of the street. The proposal is to, let's see, and that diagram shows the configuration that would have no parking on the upper portion and the angled parking on the lower portion. The proposed configuration is just to straighten the street out and have parallel parking instead of angled parking on a portion of the street, parallel parking on most of it except where we have a mid-block pedestrian crossing where there would not be any on-street parking. So that configuration would look more like this in a cross-section view, sidewalk on each side, 2 travel lanes and 2 parking lanes. So the criteria for major modification amendment is that the amendment must be in the best long-term interests of the community. And there's not a lot to say about the well, there is a lot to say, and it was actually in the packet. The port submitted a very detailed explanation of the purpose for the changes, and primarily it is to create a much more efficient development configuration, much more attractive for future users on that property. And so there's a bit of detail provided in the port's background material. But also an amendment to the plan development overlay zone requires meeting the findings that apply to site-specific rezones, and those are here up on the screen, consistent with the comprehensive plan, provides for the public health, safety, and welfare, mitigates anticipated impacts on future land uses, and again, the best long-term interests of the community. So with that, staff has recommended approval of the major modification. There's a resolution in your packet that contains findings and conclusions that would recommend that the City Council approve this amendment. So with that, I'm done unless you have questions for me.
Does anybody have questions?
Maybe. I'm just curious because I'm not as familiar with the project. So in the, they were talking about the Vista area. I was just wondering where that is in the site.
Well, I think probably defer that question to Laura Gurley, who is here from the Port of Everett tonight, and she can probably talk better to the materials that have been submitted with the application.
It's just basically, I'm curious, you know.
Okay.
I was talking about all the connections to the various areas.
Does anybody else have any questions for Alan? Because if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing and call you up and have you do all that.
Okay, thank you. Laura Gurley with the Port of Everett. I'm a planner, and I was going to come up and say, do you have any questions? So good timing. Thank you, Alan, for all your hard work on this with helping us through the process. But to answer your question, Commissioner Lavra, the vistas are basically corridors and points where people can congregate and look at the marina, look at the sound, and by straightening Weaver Street, it actually opens up this tail end area where it meets with the marina and makes that gathering space a little bit more efficient. So that's the vista that we were talking about there.
I
They're
see.
kind of little street end viewpoint areas.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Is this change as a result of feedback you got from a prospective tenant or developer, or what's the reason behind the change other than what I see here?
So if, I don't know if I need to stay with the microphone, but this lot, so no, because we don't have a developer yet for those lots. But this lot and this lot are a really weird shape right now, and especially this lot, we're planning on whoever develops it to have parking on the lower levels. And to try to get efficient layout of parking spaces in a little weird triangle,
Agreed.
it was, we weren't getting as much parking out of the area as we could. So that was one of the reasons, as well as we gained, I think, off the top of my head, I think it was 14 more parking spaces by having parallel parking on both sides of the street. And that doesn't even count what's going to be inside the building.
Got it.
So it was just, you know, squares are efficient when it comes to development.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Okay, no
Thank you.
questions? Thank you. Do I hear a move to close the public hearing?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Finch,
Yes.
Commissioner Yanasak,
Yes.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdale,
Yes.
Commissioner Holland,
Yes.
Commissioner Lavra,
Yes.
Chair Beck.
Yes. So I have in front of me a resolution recommending the city council approve a major modification to the Port of Everett's Waterfront Place Plan Development Overlay Zone Master Plan, consisting of realignment of Weaver Street. And this is resolution number 1911.
I move that we approve Resolution 1911 as presented.
Second.
Commissioner Finch,
Yes.
Commissioner Yanasak,
Yes.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdale,
Yes.
Commissioner Holland,
Yes.
Commissioner Lavra,
Yes.
Chair Beck.
Yes. All right.
Thank you.
All right, moving back to the original agenda. Item number 1, 2, and 3, we actually had a public hearing on at the beginning of the month. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and if you could hit the highlights on the sign development code, that'd be terrific.
Sure, thank you. David Tyler, planning staff. And what you have before you is 3 resolutions. One takes care of all the sign regulations plus related amendments to Title 19, that's the zoning code. So for example, there are related changes to some of the other chapters of the zoning code that have sign standards in them. So we'll pull those out, put them into this sign chapter. So that's one resolution. The second one is minor amendments to procedural requirements in Title 15. Need to do a separate resolution because it's a different title. And then the third resolution is, again, more minor amendments to Title 18, which is our land division or land division code, which actually has sign regulations in it. So we'll pull those regulations out and put them in the sign chapter. So since, or I guess, you know, in conjunction with the public hearing, we did receive a few comments from some of the sign companies. We've highlighted our response and provided a summary of some of the changes that we made since the last meeting on the cover memo. And so I'll just highlight those changes very quickly. One, there was a question about monument signs and why we have a height limit for those. And that was a good question. It caused us to relook at that definition, remove the height limit, and make some more clarification so we can clearly distinguish between what's a monument sign and what's a freestanding or pole or pylon sign. So we got some additional clarification there. With regard to freestanding signs, there was also a comment received concerning why we have a requirement for a dark background if the logo or image or lettering is lighter. And so we've gotten, again, some comments from the sign companies. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of support for that particular provision, which originated from the E1 MUO chapter of the zoning code. We had pulled that over, so we're recommending that that be removed. And then lastly, there is a change to temporary signs, specifically banner-type signs. We increased the square footage of that banner signs to, I believe, 32 square feet. with a 30-day duration, so that more closely matches the existing sign standard for banner-type signs, with the requirement that they be placed on the wall of the building and not attached to a fence or some other structure. So those changes are, for the most part, I believe, highlighted in the first resolution, and I'm available for questions if anybody has anything.
Commissioner Finch?
Done.
David, I've got a couple questions for you, just for clarity. I'm probably missing something here, but
Sure.
when I look at the outline for the new chapter 1936 that appears on page 4, it appears that there is under section 050, there's a subsection B on monument signs. But when I go to the text, I don't see a section on monument signs. It goes right from freestanding to wall signs.
Okay.
And I'm not
That's-
sure if there was if you inadvertently omitted a section of the text or whether the outline is actually wrong.
Well, we deleted that section of text after deleting the dark background requirement. There was really no specific standards left for monument signs, so we deleted that, but that was an oversight, not deleting
On
from
the
the
outline.
outline. So
Yeah.
we'll do that.
Okay.
Make sure that's in the final ordinance. And we do differentiate monument signs within the body of the text elsewhere in the table. There are different standards.
Well, I
for
noticed
for
there's a height
setbacks.
standard in there now too, about 8 feet and stuff. so.
Correct.
The other question is about a table that appears, it seems like it's supposed to remain, and I'm not sure if it really is supposed to remain. It's on page 43. And it appears that there's still sign categories E in this table. And earlier on in the text, you've eliminated category E in your other tables.
Oh, I see.
And I don't know whether I'm just misreading this table, if the table's supposed to be all deleted, or if it's...
Yeah, the table is not supposed to be deleted, but that particular row that addresses sign category is supposed to be deleted in its entirety.
Oh, okay.
So any references to sign category A, B, C, D, or E
So the whole
sign-
bottom part of the table will disappear
will
then?
disappear, correct, yeah. So there's,
Gotcha.
yeah, I see an A and a B there that probably need to be
Yeah.
struck.
Yeah.
As well as, well, all the footnotes below get struck as well.
Okay.
So thank you for catching that.
That's it for my questions.
Just to follow up on Commissioner Zelinski, so if the table's not going away, but these letters are, what's left in the table, I guess?
This is essentially an excerpt from Table 6.1, so we didn't provide the whole table because it's enormous.
Oh, okay.
So it's, we
Oh, I got
basically,
you. It's in the zone.
basically just showed the portion of it dealing with sign categories.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions? All right. Well, I have 3 resolutions in front of me. The first of the resolutions is number 1908, and this is the one that has to do with sign regulations in Chapter 1936 of the Everett Municipal Code to apply citywide. Do I hear a move to adopt?
With the corrections just mentioned, I would move approval of Resolution 19-08.
Second?
Commissioner Finch,
Yes.
Commissioner Yanusak,
Yes.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Yes?
Commissioner Tisdale,
Yes.
Commissioner Holland,
Yes.
Commissioner Lavra,
Yes.
Chair Beck.
Yes. All right. The second resolution is 1909, and this is a resolution recommending that the City Council amend Everett Municipal Code Title 15 Local Project Review Procedures in order to be consistent with amendments to the citywide development regulations for signs.
Move that we approve Resolution 1909 as presented?
Second.
Commissioner Finch,
Yes.
Commissioner Yanusak,
Yes.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdale,
Yes.
Commissioner Holland,
Yes.
Commissioner Lavra,
Yes.
Chair Beck.
Yes. All right, the last of these sign regulations is Resolution 1910, a resolution recommending the City Council amend Everett Municipal Code Title 18, Land Division, in order to be consistent with amendments to the citywide development regulations for signs.
Move that we approve Resolution 19-10 as presented.
Second.
Commissioner Finch?
Yes.
Commissioner Yanusak?
Yes.
Commissioner Zelinski?
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdale?
Yes.
Commissioner Holland?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavra?
Yes.
Chair Beck?
Yes. So at this point, we've pretty much concluded most of the items. Is there any other business that we need to?
No business. Our next meeting will be May 7th. I don't remember what will be on the agenda, but I'm sure we'll have something. It's only 3 weeks away, so I'm sure we can find some good subject for discussion that night. If they're escaping my mind, I know that they're on David's schedule back in the office.
Thank you. Well, with that, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, it wasn't